You've heard it said that music is the universal language. It stirs the heart and grips the gut. And with the advent and availability of recorded music, it also marks history itself. Recorded music is a sort of Rolodex for the ear, a ready tab for remembering the times of this or that. Rock and roll. Who would have thought 35 years ago this music would become the soundtrack for the second half of the 20th century?
A roll over Beethoven, tell Tchaikovsky the news.
For the next 5 nights, we'll feature some of the artists who laid down the basic rock tracks, rock and roll pioneers, mostly who live in Florida and all with Florida ties. What they gave, what they got, and what can happen when the doo-wop stops.
See, a lot of the bebop players, like, Charlie Christian when he was playing in the era of early Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, that was setting up rock and roll.
Basically, the record industry started up in 1946.
After the war.
After the war.
Restarted.
It restarted, and it started with basically race records.
It was racial days, very racial days.
Little Willie John and all these other black groups, they were race records, so you couldn't buy them anywhere. You had to go to black parts of town to buy these records.
I hear you knocking, but you can't come in.
Those records basically all sold black, except for the few people like yourself that love the art of the blues. I distributed records, every label, every independent label here in Florida. Most of the sales with the jukeboxes.
At what point did it cross over into the larger community, the white community?
In the 50s, they hadn't crossed yet until, I guess, later on when the
55.
when the doo-wop stuff came in. Then they started to cross.
Good night, sweetheart, well, it's time to go.
That was something we sang on the street corner. It was something that we didn't want to record. They made us record the next week.
By circa 1954-55, the start of my high school years, jukeboxes outside the black community started to turn white kids onto the music we first called rhythm and blues. And though not many mainline record stores stocked it, those of us who were diligent enough could find a few radio stations that played it late at night.
Heart made of stone.
I used to listen at night to WLAC.
That was it, period. That was it.
They'd be on from 12 midnight, 5 nights a week, till like 4 in the morning. And you sit and listen to that in the South.
You and I both.
Yeah, they sit and listen to it all night, man.
So the Charms were your first big act.
I came up with a song on Deluxe Records called Hearts of Stone. It sold 1 million records. In those days, I mean, there was no real work for a group. They would work, get a hit record and work a little Chitlin, a little Chitlin area.
Don't hold back.
Get them black people out of here. I'm not feeding off none of them. And you would go to the back door, I still wouldn't feed. So we had to go to supermarkets, buy cheese and crackers and stuff like that.
And you were big stars.
Big star. And I often thought of that as a youngster. How can they treat me like this? And they want to hear my music.
I couldn't sleep at all.
If you had been white rather than a black artist, would it have been any different for you?
Oh, of course, it'd have been different. But a lot of white acts had just as hard a time as I had.
My manager told me to my face, Carl, it's a shame that the Coasters are not a white group. You would be the richest people on earth.
But they were not. Tonight at 11 o'clock, you may be surprised at how little Carl Gardner and the Coasters, along with so many other early rockers, got for all they gave. Later in the week, a look at how well or not so well some are faring today, and at an effort underway here in Florida to help those who need help when the doo-wop stops.
And still today they don't get royalties?
Well, some do, some don't. That's another part of the story.
We'll look forward.
In part one of our special series, When the Doo-Wop Stops, we showed you a bit about the roots of rock and roll, nurtured in the jazz-rich soil of rhythm and blues, for the so-called race record consumption of America's black communities in the post-war 40s and early 50s.
You cash in nothing but trash. You cash in nothing but trash.
Tonight, we pick up in the mid and late 50s when white kids embraced black music as anthems of juvenile rebellion, and marketing-minded entrepreneurs looked for white performers who could copy the flavor of original black artists in order to widen the white audience and its race-resistant riches.
That's all I know, Mama, anyway do.
Amazingly, a 21-year-old Memphis truck driver somehow blended a gyrating hint of urban blackness with the country music of a Jim Crow South, and suddenly, rock and roll was a big-money industry, doo-wop and all.
Take a walk down the street to Heartbreak Hotel where you will be.
Elvis was good. I ain't gonna lie to you. Except that he was not the king. It was Little Richard. It was Little Richard, Chuck Berry.
Sleeping and a sliding, peeping and a hiding, been told a long time ago.
If Elvis's success helped widen the stage for more blacks to perform with whites equally, it ironically also widened the disparity of equal pay.
Charlie Brown, Charlie Brown.
Carl Gardner of the Coasters, now a resident of Port St. Lucie, Florida. What was the most money you ever made in a single year during the heyday of the Coasters?
8 to 10,000, something like that.
You mean to tell me the most you ever made was 8 to 10, maybe $12,000?
I can't see where we did any better.
16 candles.
The Crest, J.T. Carter, who lives in Cooper City.
We didn't know if that was good money or great money. All we knew is we had new cars, we had new clothes. On the other hand, the record company said, look, kid, be cool. Take this wad of money, put it in your pocket.
How much money did that company make off of you, do you figure?
There must have been millions, at least, easily.
Several $1 million.
Several $1 million, I would say, easily.
The record ripped everybody off.
Miami's own Sam Moore of the legendary Sam and Dave. He began in the small clubs of Liberty City in Overtown.
There were millions made off of Sam and Dave. That's, my God, we knew nothing about.
Bobby Lewis is Tossin' and Turnin', the #1 song for all of 1961. Since then, no more big hits, but lots of real life Tossin' and Turnin'.
I've worked as maintenance man or maintenance helper, mopping floors, washing windows.
I worked in a dairy up in Virginia.
I worked in a steel mill.
I made automobiles, cab driving, I did. But that's it.
I didn't regret one bit of it, and I don't regret it now. I'm happy because every wound that I've endured is like a medal that I pinned on myself.
For now, at least, Bobby Lewis, the Spaniels, and more early rock stars are performing again on the increasingly popular oldie circuit. More about that tomorrow at 11, plus a look at why so many made money but retained relatively little, and in some cases none at all. And we'll touch on how that hurts them today, as we set up later in the week reports on a Florida-based effort to help and care for those who lose out when the doo-wop stops. You know, in the post-Beatles rock superstar era, more than a few critics challenge the cultural value that adoringly heaps millions of dollars on people who turn out recorded music, often with no higher aim than to rake in those mega bucks. Whether you agree or disagree with that criticism, most early rock and rollers never realized anywhere near the riches of their latter-day counterparts. Some of the consequences of that inequity is what we turn to tonight in When the Doo-Wop Stops.
Come on, baby. Let's do the twist.
We ended up at the North Miami Armory. Hank was writing the songs, and we were going over the songs, and he came up with this song, The Twist. But it was a real blues. It was, come on, baby, let's do the twist. And I says, Hank, let's put this together, like, and make it a dance song. I said, Chubby, you want a hit? Listen to this twist. And he took it back to Philadelphia. And the only thing is I gave up my publishing rights, which was worth about $10 million.
Whether it was was Hank Mallard's original version, produced by Miami record entrepreneur Henry Stone, or Chubby Checker's smash seller, The Twist was rock's first national dance craze in the early 60s. Jackie Kennedy even brought it into the White House.
We didn't know it was going to be so financially successful. We signed contracts with people that we thought were our friends, who turned out to be unscrupulous businessmen who were just looking to feather their own nests.
Joey D now lives in Clearwater, performs on the oldie circuit, and does very well. More than years, however, separate him from his headliner celebrity youth at Manhattan's Peppermint Lounge in 1961.
I was just having a wonderful time, being adored by all these people from all over the world.
All of that money and all of that fame to hit you all at once at a very early age, it can be very, very devastating.
By the time I was 21, I had gained and lost $1 million.
You get businessmen out here, and they, business is business. They take advantage, and they take money, and they play tricks.
Mark Stevens of the Dovells came to realize rock music turned into rock business. And by tending to that, like his friend Joey D, both have been able to keep making good music and good livings.
I'm fortunate. I'm what I call a rock and roll survivor, John.
It feels like raindrops falling from my eyes.
Dee Clark did not survive, so fortunately, the lyrics to his 1961 song Raindrops now fall with rueful irony. Broke and sick with chronic heart disease, Clark has come to cherish the friendship of a Toccoa, Georgia motel owner, just a good Samaritan who remembered the man and his music.
This woman took him in, gave him a room, didn't worry about whether the rent was ever paid, saw to it he had his medication, saw to it that he had his meals. And for the last several years, Dee Clark has been living there with Miss Irene taking care of him.
Judith Richardson Haynes, prime volunteer for the Love of Rock and Roll Foundation, set up by Joey D and aimed at providing quality retirement living outside Tampa for those in need when the doo-wop stops.
Major names in our business from 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And they're looking for this facility to come to fruition.
And how close are they to fruition? We will show you tomorrow. Along with their long-term goals, there'll be more music, of course, and before the week is out, you'll hear one-time Miami-based rocker Wayne Cochran tell why he walked away from it all into the church when the doo-wop stops picks up tomorrow. That old saying, you can't buy happiness, is only partly true. For example, I've got a stack of 45 RPM records going back nearly 40 years, paid less than $1 for any one of them. Like my life, there are a few scratches I regret, but each song offers a little moment of happiness every time I play it. They're touchstones to dear times and to the kinds of dreams that are magic only when you're young.
This magic moment, so different and so new.
Some of the people who provided those magic moments have done well. Others, though, took cues from many of their recordings and one way or another just faded out. Jackie Wilson spent the last 9 years of his life in a stroke-induced coma. But the time he died, the money was long gone, too.
The final monies for the tombstone were created by a disc jockey in Orlando, Florida, who solicited funds over the air.
Let it roll like a big wheel.
Joe Turner, when he finally passed, several people like Paul Schaefer and some of the Young Rascals did a benefit for him to take care of the funeral expenses.
The average person seems to feel that if you had a hit record, or lucky enough to have more than that you would be set for life.
Kansas City, here I come.
Wilbert Harrison, as an example, had one of the biggest records of all time, Kansas City. They gave him a Cadillac. That's all he got.
They had no idea how much money they were generating for the record companies.
At that time, you see, I didn't know what I know now. I thought I was getting millions.
Now, what you gonna do?
We've located a piece of property now here in the state of Florida where we want to build this facility. It's going to be similar to the Actors Home, which they have in California.
Joey D. is president of the Foundation for the Love of Rock and Roll, with a steering committee of Tampa area business leaders and the determination of volunteers, devotedly led by Judith Richardson Haynes. A project to provide quality retirement living when the doo-wop stops is apparently about to be realized.
This isn't going to be some welfare hotel. This is going to be an entire community that is a place that you or I would be very happy and very proud to live.
John, how are you?
Bobby Lewis, whose sight is severely impaired by glaucoma, supports the project, but says he's not a candidate to live there.
I'm so independent. I doubt if I want to. I'd like to help formulate it and help get it started. They helped people like D. Clark, who had a stroke. I'm sure they're trying to help Mary Wells.
Mary Wells has throat cancer.
The idea is to be able to cover a gamut of needs for the people, the pioneers of the industry.
I want people to remember them for what they were trying to do, their music.
There you are, little star.
Tomorrow night at 11 o'clock, we will talk with one-time Miami rocker turned preacher Wayne Cochran. Look at how some Johnny-come-latelys are cashing in on a lot of old rockers' reputations, review some women of early rock, and reach back to some of the fun and freedom associated with the music when we wind up, when the doo-wop stops tomorrow night. If you have watched our special series, When the Doo-Wop Stops All Week, you have probably noticed how scant our reports have been on female recording artists. That's because early rock was frankly dominated by male performers. Etta James' 1955 The Wallflower is a classic of the period, but her only real hit. Ruth Brown still has rhythm and blues fans, and Laverne Baker was a real rocker. Connie Francis crossover pop, Brenda Lee, Leslie Gore, and a few others, record sales notwithstanding. Not till Phil Spector's wall of sound girl groups and Motown's 60s power surge did women start to have an equal share of the rock stage with men.
Today is the day of the female artist. There was a time when there were all males out there. I mean, it was just men, men, men.
Walking down the street. See the girl with the red dress on. She can do the ballet all night long.
A time when most people, male or female, hardly knew the word sexist was in the dictionary. Most song lyrics appealed to male attitudes, too, even when sung by women.
My boyfriend's back and you're gonna be in trouble.
And doo-wop was made for girls to hear and boys to sing.
Earth angel, earth angel.
From the beginning, rock and roll stirred feelings of freedom.
They call me the wanderer.
The freedom of youth and unfettered dreams, dreams that usually included a car. The kind of car no kid I knew could afford. And the music revved up imagination. Macho soul, but Aretha was reaching for equal billing. Blue-eyed soul, that's what they call Miami's Wayne Cochran, a Jackie Gleason find who took off on a high life that led him to the depths.
I related all my problems to the music. And all this together is what caused me to wind up an alcoholic, drug addict, lost my wife and kids, had a gun in my head.
Cochran turned to the Lord instead, and he replaced his secular soul music with tending souls as a full-time minister. You don't hate the music today.
If I never heard another record in my life, I don't know if I'd even miss it enough to think that I hadn't heard it.
Run, 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 run away.
Whatever faith saved Cochran, Del Shannon missed. He killed himself this year.
His career was just having a resurgence. I think he just had a little bit in him that he had been passed over.
That's the original Coasters you're hearing, but not what you're seeing. With the new oldies popularity, a lot of new groups, with help from cut-rate-minded promoters, are adopting original artist identities.
Right now, these guys are knocking us out of so much work because of this phoniness.
Miami's Sam Moore of the old Sam and Dave is fighting a legal battle over this very issue.
I feel that the public is being duped when these groups come in. They're being misrepresented. monies they're taking under false pretenses.
You cheated, you lied.
But for all the name trademark problems, the rip-offs, the illnesses, the needs, the deaths, the rock rolls, and the doo-wop has not stopped.
As long as the rain falls, as long as your heart beats, as long as there is rhythm, timing, as long as there is life, I don't think you'll ever stop the doo-wop.
Doo-wop, doo-wop. I've got a bit of extra to be thankful for this Thanksgiving night, the folks who helped put this little series of reports together. Producer Jeff Lemlick, cameraman, editor Ralph Misiano, Dan Wajansky, and Liz Moore, who made all the post-production effects work.